Okay, so here we are. We're back in the game here. We've got some things going pretty well for us. Basically, though, now I'm just going to put our reference BSP back down to where it was, and we're going to work on that paddle here. We want to get this to look pretty close to what we want it to look pretty nice. We want it to work as we expected. Go to your blueprints. Go to your paddle pawn right, and you see this is this basic setup we got in here. Okay, so we got our paddle here. Let's just push this up even higher. Let's make this something like, we'll add a 9 to this. Maybe that'll be closer to the speed we actually want. Hit play. Yeah, now that's looking pretty good. I like that. That's a good speed for the paddle. I'm happy with that. And you see, if you move it, it's pretty smooth, it's pretty nice, and that's a good setup for the paddle. One thing you might be noticing is that it looks a little weird. Like, why is it like, I don't know how to describe it, right? It's not flat. It doesn't look like the background. That's because we're using a perspective camera. You click on the camera here, and then you go into this little tab until you change the orthographic. You'll see that everything disappears, but don't get worried about it. You just have to change the ortho width and zoom it out to a comfortable position. Then hit play, and now it looks like the background. It actually might get a little confusing to tell, like, which one's the real paddle and which one's the background. It's all an illusion. Let's find out. So let's move this background out, or at least we can just leave it where it is for now. I mean, it's not really that confusing, at least to me. So hopefully that's okay with you. Let's go to the paddle pawn right, and we're going to add in that clamping. So we want to make sure that it doesn't go off up here, it doesn't go down over here, too far. So we'll take this whole section here with the add force, drag that down, and essentially we just want to do 2 if statements to check and see what the position of the paddle is, and then use that to offset it or prevent it from moving further. So we're going to disconnect this guy right here, drag off an if. I'll make this a branch. You can just right click and type in get actor location. If I can spell. Let's see. But yeah, we get that reference here. That looks good. Now we're going to pull off of this one right here, and we're going to type in break vector. And before I go further, I'll just put context sensitive back on. And then we're going to do over here make vector. And then we're going to pull off this, and we're going to make it set actor location. Go ahead and plug the true of that branch into here. And that's looking pretty good. So what this is going to do is we're going to have a little if statement here, or we're going to have a check and say if this paddle is greater than 1500 units up, 1500 units being right here, we're going to make it so that it plugs the Y and Z position in, so it has no impact on the Y and Z position of the paddle, but in the X, which is the up and down movement, we want to make sure that it's not allowed to go above a certain limit, and we want to make sure that it's right there. So it's going to be 1500, it's going to push it to 1499, so that's just a little bit below it. And that's going to be good, so that way when we use this force here, it actually wants to push up. If it was just 1500, and we'll have an if state, we'll have a boolean here that'll check for 1500. The 1400 makes it just a little bit behind that. That way it won't actually go through that point and get stuck. That'll make sense in a minute. So we're going to go ahead and just right click over here and type in get actor location. Again, we could use the one from right here, but this works just as well. We're going to break the vector, and we're going to check with a greater than if this paddle is greater than 1500. So now all this should make sense, or at least a little bit. Go ahead and take the false and plug it in here. So what's going on here, right? Every single frame it's going to check is the current paddle location greater than 1500 units. If it's greater than 1500 units, and that means it's out of the boundary we want it to be. So it says, okay, it's out of the boundaries on the true. Set its location back to within boundaries, just a little bit below out of boundaries, which is 1500. And that way it'll never push outside of that top view. Then after that, if it's out of boundaries, do that. But if it's not out of boundaries, allow us to control the paddle normally. Let's see how that works. So I continue to press up, and nothing happens. See how it just stops there? Nothing's going on. Now let's say, for example, I just go back and I'll turn that off, and it should make sense what's going to happen. Hit stop, go to the paddle, and we'll just make it so that this automatically runs. Disconnect this entirely. Just keeps going way out. You can just go on forever. That's not what we want. We want to stop it, we want to clamp it. That's what this is doing. So we're plugging into the branch, checking if it's greater than 1500. If it is, we're setting it below 1500, and then if it's not, we just allow the paddle control normally. And there you go, it stops it. So now we've got the top, but we have not done the bottom. So the way we do that is we'll just basically be copying this, but with a few tweaks. Move this down, disconnect it, and grab this whole lot right here. Hit Control W, that'll duplicate, and then drag that down below it. So we're going to check off the false statement. So if it's not out of boundaries in the top direction, that means it may or may not be out of boundaries in the bottom direction. Or at least it's saying that when we drag off this false, it's not out of boundaries at the top. It can't be out of boundaries at top and bottom at the same time. That should make sense, right? It can't be here and here simultaneously. It's not like a Schrodinger's cat or something. Anyway, so we'll drag off false here. We'll plug it into this branch, and in this one we're going to check for the inverse. So at the bottom here, this is going to be negative 499, and this is going to be negative 1500. So it's going to check. Okay, so it's not above 1500 units up. Is it below? I'm sorry, that should be less than. Is it below a value of negative 1500? Since we centered everything out pretty well in our actual level, you know, this is negative 1500 here. Let me click out of that camera, that way you can see. This is negative 1500, this is 1500. If it's less than 1500, do the same thing, but in this case you want to set it to just below that point. That way it doesn't go out of boundaries. And so then if it's not out of boundaries at the top, it's not out of boundaries at the bottom, then we can check and add force to actually let the game continue. Let's hit save, go to the main menu, and hit play. And what do we get? Can't go out of the top, can't go out of the bottom. A little low, right? That seems a little low. That's okay, we're going to fix that. But you see it stops there. It jitters a little tiny bit. I think that's okay. You can tweak it a little more if you mind that little bit of jittering, because it's offsetting it by a single unit. But yeah, you see it stops it at the top, stops it at the bottom. Not too bad. We've got full control over this paddle. So now let's grab our camera, and we'll make it a little prettier for this guy. So we'll grab the X, move it down so that way it's centered, and let's see if that looks a little closer to what we want. Yeah, so see how it gets cut off evenly now, which tells me that we can move the camera ortho size a little bit out. Let's just go ahead and grab the orthographic size, and we'll just make it right about there. See how that looks. Yeah, there you go. So there we go. We got a nice camera set up. We got our paddle set up. Next up, we're going to be working on setting up the ball. But for now, that's going to be the end of this tutorial. I hope you found this useful. Just kind of figuring this out. Hopefully this was a good introduction. So thanks a lot. If you appreciate this video, feel free to give me a like and a subscribe and comment. I also have fan funding enabled on my YouTube channel, so if you feel like supporting my work or my future video games, please let me know. Thanks a lot, and see you in the next one.